Good morning, everyone. It's Sunday, August 11th. Steve Kerrigan, the chairman of the Massachusetts Democratic Party, is our guest this morning. Let's go on the record. The Democrats punched their ticket with Harris and Walz with the DNC convention coming up fast. Can a surge of enthusiasm be sustained? The chair is in the chair. It's time to go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter, Sharman Sakedi. It's great to have you with us this morning. As you can see, Steve Kerrigan is here this morning. He became chair of the state Democratic Party back in April of 2023, CEO of the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, back in 2012. You're not that old yet, huh? In 2014, he was the party's nominee for lieutenant governor on the ticket with Martha Coakley at the time. He earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland. It's great to see you, Steve. Thanks for coming.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Let's talk about the DNC. That's in your wheelhouse.
Yes.
Just over a week away. Let's talk about what happened in a very short amount of time. Biden out, Harris in, and a race that seemed really to be slipping away from the Democrats. Yeah. Suddenly, a very different story. So I want to start off with, do you think this was a fair process?
I do. So, and I've heard this from a number of folks, just to give a little civics education, particularly on political parties. When voters vote in presidential primaries, it's part of a process that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have put forth. What they're voting for is to elect delegates to go to the National Convention to cast a vote. The theory is that they cast the vote in favor of the candidate that won their district or their state. So when our voters and 14 million other people across the country voted in the primary process, they voted for Joe Biden. They voted for delegates to go to vote for Joe Biden. But once Joe Biden announced he was no longer running for president on that Sunday, they were all released from that pledge, which meant it was a very open convention. What happened was Vice President Harris was able to quickly mobilize. I was on the phone with her campaign all day that day and into 1 a.m. that night to talk to party leaders and delegates all across the country, and she was able to quickly galvanize enough support from elected delegates.
I want to ask you about that because there was a lot of talk about a contested convention, and
we like to say open.
Well, I mean, some would say this is more like a coronation. Is that fair or unfair?
No, the process worked. We had 98% of the pledged delegates were pledged to Joe Biden. Joe Biden was no longer a candidate. Therefore, all those people, and I talked to all 116 of us in Massachusetts between the moment he announced he was dropping out and the moment we endorsed her, less than 24 hours later.
Were you surprised at how quickly the party mobilized around her? I
Not
think
really.
Some Democrats were.
Maybe, but I wasn't, because I've been watching her as a true partner to Joe Biden over the last 3.5 years as they really helped turn this country around and had huge, incredibly consequential legislative accomplishments. And she is ready for the job. She understands that when President Biden chose her to be a running mate, he chose someone who could do the job on day one, which when he dropped out, we knew she could do the job on day one.
But she is the Democratic nominee, and not one vote has been cast for her for president of the United States. Not one.
Actually, it's thousands of delegates, which is the only people who pick a nominee.
Thousands
of delegates have already voted for her.
But they not one vote has gone in. The 14 million votes you talked about were for, as you said, Joe Biden for president.
No, they were for delegates to go to our national
convention.
Delegates
to go to the thing, blah, blah, blah. Very good point.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Tim Walz. Let's talk about the vice presidential choice. Former President Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, are framing Walz as a liberal extremist. You're chuckling.
Sure, I'm chuckling. Yeah.
Okay. What is your view of Governor Walz?
I think he's fantastic. I think he emanates joy. He is this, corn-fed Nebraska guy who I had a chance to see him speak a couple of years ago, who just sort of lights up a room with his enthusiasm. But it's not all just fluff. Like, that man understands how to get things done. And that's what the people of Minnesota understand. That's why they sent him to Congress for so many terms. It's why I elected him twice as governor. And it's why the vice president chose him to be her running mate. This is a ticket that is incredible relative to getting things done. And the American people can't wait for progress anymore. They need a ticket that's going to get things done.
Do we have to play electoral college chess around here? In other words, the Democratic candidate doesn't have a problem in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah.
The Democratic candidate might have a problem in the state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
So why didn't, for example, she choose Josh Shapiro, so maybe he could deliver Pennsylvania to that ticket?
It's one of my favorite things that we do in American politics every 4 years, which is everybody tries to decide what pick will have the biggest electoral impact for vice president. What I love is that Donald Trump, the same breath, says people don't vote for the vice presidential candidate, and then he says she was dumb not to pick Josh Shapiro because he would have been a better. You can't have it both ways. The fact is, if you go back decades, at least most of my life, no one has chosen a vice president to win a swing state. Joe Biden wasn't going to win a swing state for somebody. Dick Cheney wasn't going to win a swing state. George H.W. Bush. None of these people were going to win swing states. They were the right partner for the nominee at the time, and that's the most important task. Picking the right partner who can do the job on day one. She did that with Tim Walz.
But first, the most important task is to win.
Sure, but Vice President Harris understands that's on her. That's on her, and we have a responsibility to help her bring that across the line.
With the fact, just before we step up,
Yeah.
before we step up the vice presidential plane a little bit here, Vance is from Ohio and Walz is from Nebraska, Minnesota, whatever you want. They're both from the Midwest, so did they cancel each other out or what?
I think Tim Walz. Actually, Governor Healy said it best on this network this week when she said comparing Tim Walz to J.D. Vance is like comparing a linebacker to a water boy. All due respect to water boys, Tim Walz will wipe the floor with J.D. Vance, and I look forward to seeing him.
All right, because of the riots at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, how potential protests are handled this time around, that's going to receive a fair amount of scrutiny. Pro-Palestinian protesters likely to be there. How concerned are you about what could happen?
So first, I call them demonstrators, and most folks call them protesters. I call them demonstrators because we in the Democratic Party welcome people demonstrating their First Amendment rights. That's why we plan for it. I know in Chicago they have a few specific areas which are literally set up with a stage, with microphones, with opportunities for people, for the demonstrators to come and talk about the issues that they care about. But we also have a right to have a convention. The delegates have a right, the media covering it, and the people at home watching have a right to have a convention that is peaceful. And so all we ask is that those attending the convention behave so in a respectful manner. If they wish to demonstrate, as is their right as Americans, there's plenty of places for them to do that. I also remind folks all the time, because my friends in Chicago who are organizing this get frustrated when everybody says, oh, 1968. There was a convention.
A lot of stuff happened in 68.
And there was a convention there in
that.
1996, too.
Yeah.
And everything went fine. And we've been focused. I was on the host committee for the convention here in Boston, the first convention after 9/11.
But fair to say, in recent years, we haven't seen a presidential election like this either.
This one.
But the focus on security and how you deal with things like that and disruptions has been really pivotal since the 9/11 post 9/11 era. And so I have all the confidence in the world it will be a safe, well organized, and well run convention.
So let's talk about the Democratic Party. If Kamala Harris loses the election, will there be a steep price to pay for Democrats who convinced Biden to step aside?
We worry about those types of things after all the votes are counted.
If it happens.
I have all the confidence in the world. We have seen such an energy and a resurgence in our party in the last few weeks. It is astounding. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to take that energy and not just help get themselves elected, but get Democrats elected up.
So Democrats don't need to do any serious soul searching about getting behind Biden's second term question. Remember, he himself said he was a transitional president, and then the debate thing happened. And
what Joe Biden did, to know Joe Biden is to love Joe Biden, but what Joe Biden did was a very ordinary thing for Joe Biden to do, but an extraordinary act of patriotism. He had wanted to be president. He served as the most consequential president in the lifetime of anybody watching this program, but understood that he had to put country above himself and above any impact it might have even on his party. And he did that, and he should be celebrated for that. But he also chose a fantastic running mate back in 2020, who included her as a true partner, as he was for President Obama, so that she could be prepared on day one to do this job, as she is.
Should he have stepped aside earlier? Should he have done this earlier? And should Democrats have been more transparent about what we all saw in that debate?
I think we were all as transparent as we could be. It was a bad debate. But I will say that was a decision only for him to make. He made it when he made it, and I am grateful to him for his service. And by the way, he hasn't stopped. He just had one of the most consequential hostage negotiations in history of our country, and has continued to make huge strides without the help of Republicans in Congress, because he understands his term doesn't end until 11:59 on January 20th.
Our conversation with Steve Kerrigan continues right after the break.